Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Honiger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Honiger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. This week we've got two guests on, which we don't do very often, but Dave Leathwick and Christian Sauerman from AgResearch are joining us to talk about drench resistance in cattle, which is not something everyone talks about. But before we get into that, Sophie, you've written another great article for the Hub. What's on that one this week?
Yeah, so I thought based on the season and everyone's coming into lambing, I would put a few of my tips and tricks for lamb rearing down on altogether. I spent at least 10 or 12 years rearing lambs for sheep dairies, and I've done 20 myself and I've done 5,000 for them. And so having that experience from sort of doing trials and the research and doing it in masses versus doing 20 of your own, I've sort of figured out what works and what doesn't. And just to share those tips, I love sheep. I don't know if any of you know that, but don't like any of them.
A couple of times.
Maybe. So just, if I can help you guys save one lamb, that's my job done. So I thought I'd put a few tips down there. And for any clients listening to this, over the next few months, feel free to give me a ring at any time if you have any lamb rearing issues. I love helping with it. It's my jam. I can help problem solve, and I'm here to answer those questions. So flick us an email, give me a ring if you've got a lamb that's dying on you, and I'll try and save it for you.
Excellent. So obviously great to have that skill set in the business as a complete bonus. And Sophie at nextgenagri.com will find Sophie, or get in touch with any of us and we'll make sure we can help you find Sophie and get those answers on those lambs. Obviously different people have different approaches, but most of us forget what we should be doing because we haven't done it for 12 months since the last time we had a crack at it, and have plenty of horror stories out there. So anyone who's having a bit of a battle with something, get in touch with Sophie. That'd be awesome. We're getting underway this now with our show this week. Dave and Christian describe them both as themselves as sort of accidental parasitologists. They studying other things and ended up working in parasitology. They are obviously pretty passionate about it, as you'll hear in this show. And I guess we'll go cover things like how they came across the disease or drench resistance in cattle, and how long it's been around and what it means in terms of going forward. Often, some people it won't be a factor for, but particularly people who are finishing a lot of stock that are coming from other places and being sort of in under intensive situations, it could be having an influence on your business, and you sort of don't want to be at the bottom of the cliff of that game. You want to be somewhere making decisions before it's too late. So, a great little podcast to listen along to around drench resistance in cattle. We'll get underway with this week's show with Dave Leathwick and Christian Sauerman. As mentioned, this week's a bit different. We've got two guests on. We don't do that very often, but it's great to have a couple of people on. Welcome, Christian, and welcome, Dave.
Afternoon.
Hi, Mark.
So we're talking drench resistance in cattle today, which is not something that we hear a lot mentioned. But before we get into the detail, it'd be good to hear about your backgrounds. We might start with you, Dave. You're a principal scientist at AgResearch. Just I guess how you ended up looking at parasites in cattle would be good to hear.
Well, it was totally unplanned. I went to Canterbury University with the intention of being an entomologist and working on insects. And I was the last ever graduate from Lincoln College before it became a university, which I'm immensely proud of. And I tell everyone at every opportunity. But so I came out as an entomologist and immediately got a job modelling drug resistance in parasites of sheep. And I moved up to Palmerston North in 1988, intending to stay 2 years. So 36 years later, I'm still sort of here. Not quite sure how that happened, but it did. And I've spent all of that time focused almost entirely on drug resistance and parasites in sheep, cattle, deer, horses, goats, pretty much.
Excellent. Christian, we'll head to you. Yours a bit of a story of chance and how you ended up, both of you are accidental parasitologists, it seems.
Yeah, so similar to Dave, I'm a biologist or zoologist by trade and worked for the cosmetic industry for a while, but wanted to get out of there. And it's a long story and a lot of chances that just came my way. So I ended up with Bill Pomeroy and Dave Leathwick for a PhD. That was 15, 16 years ago now. And that was actually based on the last national survey the team did on drench resistance in cattle. So I was looking at Coperia in cattle explicitly during my PhD. And because Dave paid for my PhD, he said, well, once you're finished, I want some sort of return of investment from you. So you stay here in New Zealand for at least 3 years and work for me. For me, that was great. You know, you do a PhD and more or less have a guaranteed postdoc afterwards. And that postdoc turned into a permanent position. So I joined AgResearch 10 years ago and now work permanently as a scientist, as a parasitologist in the parasitology team.
Excellent. Great. So we spent a fair bit of time talking about drench resistance in sheep, and we've seen, well, what seems like a rapid rise. I know that you'll be suggesting otherwise, that it's been coming at us for a long time, but I guess all of a sudden people have realised that a lot of the chemicals aren't working as well as they used to. But in cattle, we don't hear a lot about it, so it'd be good to maybe start high level, Dave, as to sort of over your career, what you're sort of seeing creeping up on all species.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk to people about these things and they don't hear you and they think it won't happen to me. You know, the great analogy is, blokes getting a prostate test every year for prostate cancer, and many people don't test because they know it's not going to happen to them until it does. And So drench resistance is very much the same. It's always been considered that it was a goat-sheep problem, and cattle farmers, even today, be very few that would test their drenches or even thought about testing their drenches. But in reality, the national survey that was done in cattle in 2004-05, virtually every farm in New Zealand had drench resistance and Coperia to at least one active. And it just made no difference. Nobody paid any attention. And, it was one of those wonderful things that just keep going and nothing will go wrong and it's all good. But the last couple of years, things have changed. And that, the reason we're talking to you today is because we're now starting to see it's hard to guess, but it's not uncommon now for triple resistance in Coperia and to a lesser extent in Ostatagia, and we're seeing it in cattle systems all over the country. So,
yeah, right. Before we delve further into that, we probably should have started high level in terms of what parasites we tend to be. Yeah, what are the main lurgies we're dealing with? I don't know which of you want to tackle that, but obviously you've mentioned Coperia and Ostatagia. Is there others that are causing production losses in cattle?
Well, Christian's the cattle expert, so I'm going to pass that ball to him.
Beautiful.
I think when it comes to cattle, or when it comes to animals, to livestock, it's always young animals that normally suffer the most from parasites. And in young cattle, it's definitely Coperia in the first year that is dominant, and in the second year, it's probably switching to Ostatagia. So those two parasites are very important for the dairy industry and the beef industry because they normally tend to limit the growth rates in the first 2 years. And so when I started my PhD, it was relatively simple to get rid of Ostatagia at that stage, and I could focus on Coperia in my calves because levamisole was still working, one of the drugs against Osteotargia, so I could clean my calves and have pure infection with Coperia. And it is scary looking back to, in my life, that short period of time where we came from, we could still somehow control these parasites to now a stage where we might not be able to control them with drugs. And so we have to switch, I think, in our mindset and our parasite management strategy in the farming industry from that heavy reliance on, if we have a parasite problem, we just use a drench gun, to a more integrated approach and think about, farm systems wide, how do we manage parasites on the farm? Yeah,
and I often talk about it from the concept, I think, certainly me growing up and a lot of farmers I talk to, you kind of have this theory that you're out there to wage a war on worms to sort of wipe them out, whereas the reality is just managing a worm population, you're never going to get rid of them. So it's kind of getting out of that mindset that you're killing everything to a mindset that you're managing the population is key to winning. So older cattle, so anything older than 2 years, normally internal parasites not an issue, or is that not true?
From a practical viewpoint, that's sort of right, unless something else goes wrong. The dominant parasite in those older cattle tends to be a Trichus strongylus, Trichaxii, we would call it. And it can be pathogenic, but on the whole, once animals get past about 18 months of age, they generally don't benefit much from drenching, unless something else goes wrong. It's like, and there'll be parts of New Zealand today who will be candidates for issues because they haven't got any grass.
Yeah.
If you can't feed your animals, and everything else is going to go wrong as well. So, no,
for sure. I guess the reason we are talking today is because you've now discovered with a report on Farmers Weekly, said 4 farm studies had found triple drench resistance in cattle. So it's obviously levamisole was the last one working. It's now let the team down, so the triples are not working. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, that's where we are at. So we still have a class left in cattle, which is Leathwick's monopental.
Yeah.
But that lifetime is, of course, it goes down the same route as everything else. So that's only limited lifespan we still have left. And yeah, it's hard to see how we can continue with the farming industry when we think about high productive systems, which are mainly based on monocultures, heavily grazing, limited stock classes of animals in a high productive environment, with a total reliance on enzymatic treatments to manage parasites.
Yeah, so the thing that we probably need to point out there is the farms that we reported on, we never went and looked. I mean, that was no survey. They just dropped into our lap. They just came to us through conversations with vets and farmers. And there's quite a few vets out there today who are quite active. And so there was one vet I know in Northland, he's got 7 confirmed cases, and there will be vets all around the North Island who will have 1 or 2. So you asked the question, how prevalent is it? The answer is we don't know, but it's not that hard to find. If you take if I had to go and find one, how long would it take me to find a triple resistance in cattle? A few days, probably would be about that. Would a few phone calls and I could find some. So it's probably more common than what you would think, and it might be more common than what you would like. It's the best answer we can give, I think.
So when you're on the phone ringing those people up, what are the sort of questions that you'd be asking, as in what are the signs that drenches are failing or that not working as well as they used to?
I think so in all the cases that we dealt with, it was the vet that called us, not us that called the vet. So we weren't out there looking. And I think every case so far has been has come from the farmer who's seen clinical disease. So the farmer sees animals scouring, not growing, they look awful. Typical signs of Couperia are runny bums, sunken, gut, looking really bad. And so they call the vet. The vet comes in, starts looking for things. Hey, presto, it's got a really high egg count and it's full of worms.
Yeah.
When were they last drenched? 3 weeks ago. Okay. Problem, yep. So that's how, and that's somewhat different to the sheep. It's a bit interesting because that's slightly different to the sheep situation. A lot of drench resistance in sheep is found because the vet harasses the farmer into doing a test.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, with these cases, that's not the case. It's almost every case has come from the farmer calling the vet, I've got a problem, come and fix it.
Is that because that's at the bottom of the cliff? Like if you did a test earlier, like if you just went out to any random, you might identify it before you're at the bottom of the cliff?
Yeah, there would be some truth in that, I think. If you don't look, you haven't got a problem.
Yeah. That's the best way not to get COVID. You just don't test for it.
Yeah, that's right. I've got friends who have never had COVID.
Yeah. I think Donald Trump had this. Yeah, everyone had this story. Yeah. Yeah. Best way not to get. Well, in Australia, it was Yoni's. You just didn't test for it, so it's much easier not to have it. So, yeah. And I'm just trying to get my head around how it's developed. I mean, I know how drench resistance developed, but you would think that the adult cattle that aren't affected by those couple of parasites would be fantastic refugia, but that's obviously somehow not working, as in there's still pressure on drenches within those young cattle. And do those populations just not establish at all in older cattle, and therefore all of the Ostatagia and Couperia are in young cattle, and that's why you sort of don't end up with refugia, or what's going on that front?
That's Christian. He knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, all right, good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the cattle industry is slightly different to the sheep industry. And what I see with the cattle industry is that we have very specialized farming systems where we have farming operations and the farm buys in a lot of young stock, raises them and then sells them, or raises them for the dairy industry.
Yeah.
So you have monocultures of the same stock class, very young animals, and you don't have any other species or stock class grazing those systems. And that is just what we call a recipe for disaster, because you have those young animals which harbor a lot of parasites because they don't have a fully developed immune response yet. And over time, especially if you fail to treat them effectively, they start contaminating the farm. They load the farm with parasites. So it's an accumulating problem.
Yeah, no, cool. That makes sense. And so if I did march around some adult cattle on that land, and that would be like we could reverse this problem with the same way we'd attack it in sheep, or not?
I wouldn't say reverse, but it might help. It will definitely help if you have an older stock class in there. If you mix it with a totally different species like sheep, that would be the preferable option.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, you have to remember that Couperia is a parasite of young cattle.
Yeah.
So if you put R2s with R1s, the R2s are a great source of refugia for Ostatagia and Trichostrongylus, but they're almost totally ineffective as refugia for Couperia because their immune systems keep them out.
Yeah, okay. So they're not, fair enough. So that makes some sense, or makes a lot of sense. Yeah, excellent. So I guess what are without making recommendations, because that's not like what we obviously can't do that for individuals based on a podcast, but I guess what are the strategies that people need to talk to their vet about or make a plan around if they are one of the unlucky ones? What are the strategies that the vets would generally be talked to them about?
We've dealt with a couple of farms that have done this. The obvious answer is you have to take the reliance away from the drenches. Right? So, and as Christian said before, these monocultures of young stock, intensively grazed, finishing systems with lots of young stock, they're almost 100% relying on Drench to control worms. And if they can't do that and they keep doing those systems, then they're going to end up with dead animals. I mean, it's almost as simple as that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of a couple of farmers who we've helped. I think we helped. And so they go to a more integrated system. So fewer young stock, more older stock, more cultivation, specialist foragers, and bring in some sheep. So, even if it's contract grazing for someone else, put some more sheep in the system, drop the level of larval challenge to those young animals and take some of the pressure off them. And so you don't need to drench as much.
Yeah.
But it is, as you said, it's quite tricky, and it's quite tricky for an individual farmer because what suits one farm won't suit another. But what we tend to see is people just want to keep going. They just want, or give us what else give me something else to use. Well, I can sell you some Zolvix. Well, I can't, but you can go and buy some Zolvix, but it's going to make your eyes water when you pay the bill because it's, it's 4 times the price of a triple and it's really hard to get. So you're not going to be wanting to use it very often.
No, and I think, there's 2 problems with that strategy. One, obviously you mentioned them both, but price, and then the fact that the more we hammer it, the less distance we'll get out of it as well. So
correct.
Yeah, and it probably is a good thing that the price is staying up, and maybe that's part of the strategy. And I think we have to be really careful. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's in their interest to not to tell us, I suppose. But there's no new families coming down the line that there's not enough money in drenching cattle and sheep to justify massive investment in new chemicals. So we can't just sit back and go, well, Zolvix turned up. I don't know what the next one's will be, but there will be another one. But that's seems to be pretty risky thinking.
I suspect the companies tell us that the market no longer justifies the investment. We all know that red tape's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and
it's the same for them. So the return on the investment has to keep going up. And they can make so much more money out of cats, dogs, and humans.
And I'm right in thinking that most of our actives have actually come out of that. Like they were just accidental results out of cats and dogs anyway, aren't they? Most of our active chemicals, or have they been specific for?
There would be some truth in that. Most of them initially would have been in humans and small animals.
Yeah,
and the market certainly in sheep. Sheep don't even appear on the pie chart when the drug companies show you the split for where all their money comes from.
It's like
one of the drug companies at a seminar I was at last year said that if there is another drug for farm animals, it's likely to be a byproduct of something developed for one of the other markets. It'll be something that's developed for cats and dogs and people, and just by chance they said, oh, well, we'll register it for sheep, but it won't be a sheep-specific product.
No.
So it's a mindset thing that farmers are going to have to get. I see it virtually every farmer that I go to that's got a problem. They've all got that mindset that they can't see past the drench gun.
Yeah.
That's because that's all they've known all their lives is a drench gun. And suddenly you say, well, you can't do that anymore. And they look at you and go, what?
It's really, really annoying when stuff that you've relied on doesn't work anymore.
That's right.
In the sheep industry, we've tackled it in the same way, but also with genetics. I've never heard of a worm egg count breeding program in cattle. Is there one? Is anyone working on that? Does that make sense?
We're hoping to. Beef and lamb genetics are currently doing an evaluation on the feasibility of starting something in the next year or so. So
cool.
There's probably a reasonable chance that might come to play. Yeah.
Yep. And would that be similar as in individual worm egg counts on calves, or is it going to be like a more of a Carla type, like a saliva type test? Or
don't know the answer to that at this point. But the proposal I've seen involves both.
Yeah, which would make sense. Just trying to think about how it's because it's it's obviously a disease of the young animals, but if you can't get them to be old animals because they're dead, it's not. Yeah, it's still going to be fairly important.
Yeah, the relationship between egg count and worm burden in cattle is not as good as it is in sheep.
Right.
So there's some discussion it'll need some justification if FEC is going to work as a sampling procedure.
Yeah, right. So that's sounding like a few years of research before that gets too close to.
Don't know.
Yeah.
The protocols are all established for sheep.
Yeah.
So, but gathering the information and getting breeding values and stuff, there has been a little bit of work done in New Zealand, and there's currently some work being done. We're working with a group in France and another one, I think, in Germany at the moment.
Yeah, right.
And they're quite interested. So it's not just a New Zealand problem. It's creating global interest.
Yeah. No, excellent. What else is on the agenda in terms of your research group? What are the kind of big ticket items that you're tackling?
I'm going to leave that to the boss.
It gets a little bit tricky. Research is not cheap. It's quite expensive, and in the current environment, I think the whole research sector is struggling with funding. But we decided a while ago that we should move away from. When I was a PhD student and when I joined the team, we were focused on how can we delay the development of resistance in those parasites. I think we decided that we are at the stage where we only have 1 or 2 actives left, and we need to move away from how do we delay the development of resistance to how do we manage parasites on farm without the reliance on drugs. So we have ideas about how to do that, but we need assurance, we need facts to base our decisions on. And I think that is where the research in the near future has to go.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, all of research nothing's getting cheaper, and research is one of them. So it is a challenge to keep all that stuff going. This seems like fairly important stuff to me. And so hopefully you're successful in convincing someone of that. I don't know what else we need to cover. Really, is there anything else I haven't covered properly?
For me, the only thing, the message that farmers are going to have to get is, and it's the same with sheep, and it'll be, with everything, is for years we've gone into these monocultures, so lamb finishing, calf finishing, these really intensive monocultures of a single stock class, and those days are probably just about done. Heifer grazing for dairy industry, where a guy is entire farm is R1, Friesians, or Jerseys or whatever, and that's a very interesting situation because they bring in calves from a whole lot of different properties, and with them they bring their worms.
Yeah.
The owner, in many cases, dictates the drenching program, not the owner of the farm, the owner of the cattle, and it's in the contract that these animals will be drenched this many times with this product. Whether it works or not doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And then all those cattle share all their worms together and they all go home. So it's a wonderful selective breeding program for resistant worms. So, you'd have to say, in fact, there was people at Massey 15, 20 years ago who said some of these systems are not sustainable, and everyone just laughed at them, and it's becoming the case. So the hard sell for farmers is to change their entire farming operation. If I was a farmer and I was running one of those monocultures of anything, now's the time to start having a conversation and saying, well, look, I need to sit down with a consultant and a farm advisor and figure out how I'm going to diversify my operation to maintain my production and keep going for the next 10 or 20 years, because otherwise you might be in for a shock. Mm-hmm. And some of these people are getting some real shocks when they go out and there's a whole lot of dead animals lying all around the farm. They don't like that very much.
No, it's not the highlight of many people's day. No.
Yeah, I think it comes down to farming in the past was reliant on the use of drugs, and they were very attractive because they were relatively easy to use. You can just buy them. They were cheap, which means you can run a high productive system and can focus on production, and they absolutely worked. The problem is that's only true until they don't. And we are now at the point where they don't. The good thing is, I think it's not all doom and gloom. We know that it is possible to farm productively without that much reliance on anthelmintics. And we know that there are farms out there which already do that. The hard bit is that we are now at the point where the farming industry has to change. And that's not easy.
No, that's for sure. And I only learnt recently, never actually thought about it before, but one of our previous guests mentioned that the Barber's poleworm has almost the same size genome as humans do. So they've obviously they're a perfect little pest, really. They've got lots of DNA and massive selection pressure. We're always destined for trouble.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Well, thanks, gents. Awesome to have a chat. Yeah, look forward to seeing how that genetic works goes. That's going to be interesting, and looking forward to promoting the hell out of that once we get a tool to work with.
Yep.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks again to Heinegger, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.